The lethality of their power is greater than ever. Their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people. Literally, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
The smoke in the air of our Concord bridges and Pearl Harbors is always smelled first by the farmers who come from their simple homes to find the fire and fight.
If you embark on instituting a society where government protects you from yourself, you're in big trouble, and that's what they're doing. That's all government is force. I mean, do you have a choice about paying Medicare taxes? This government uses force to mold behavior or mold the economy. They've overstepped the bounds, and they violated the whole concept of our revolution and our Constitution.
Well, folks, it's Friday evening, and I've got a nice little echo going, and now it's gone. Fantastic. It's the Freedom Link. And if you haven't noticed, there's been a lot going on in the news today. To talk about this tonight, of course, I've got my sidekick, Tim Watts, and also Ryan Brooks from The Sound of Freedom, and Ken Hildebrand from The Information Nation, theinformationnation.com. And, boys, I mean, one of the sickest damn shootings I think I've ever heard of. I mean, totally turned my stomach. I'm still sick to my stomach, even as we speak tonight. But I've seen a lot of interesting reaction and fallout because of this. And I've assembled all you guys together so that we can discuss this, because there are a lot of things that need to be discussed that are not being discussed. As a matter of fact, I think it's the wrong things that are being discussed. So tonight, I know, Timmy, you've done a lot of research on this, and as I'm sure you have, Ryan, and I know, Ken, you have. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to address is CNN wrote an article saying massacre of children leaves many asking, where's God? And I want to respond to that first and foremost before we get into anything else. There's a picture I saw on Facebook, and on this graphic, it was written like a letter, and it says, "Dear God, why do you allow so much violence? Why do you allow so much violence to go on in our school? Signed, concerned student." And God writes back, and he says, "Dear concerned student, because I'm not allowed in the school. No, because I'm not allowed in the school, God." I don't think it can't be much more clear than that. How long have we been pushing God out of society, God out of the schools? We've been pushing him out. So when people ask, well, where's God? Where do you think he is? Very interesting. Timmy, what do you think?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is, we talked off air, a story that I've covered for a long time on News Focus is that, this is one of the biggest cover-ups from the big pharma, the pharmaceutical industry, for years, and it's been going back a long, long time into the 90s. From all of the mass postal shootings we used to have, the Columbine shooting, psychotropic drugs have been involved in many of these shootings, and big pharma has spent millions to cover this story up. Again, Columbine, a lot of the postal shootings, people that have gone off these new psychotropic drugs like Zoloft and Paxil and Buspar. These are very dangerous drugs, and the minute you go off them, your brain flips. And one other thing that about this thing today, and we'll play the clip here coming up, the governor of Connecticut saying that they were told to expect this. I mean, seriously? Really?
It's all very interesting. Guys, chime in at any time. I mean, if you have anything to add to the conversation, you are more than welcome to cut me off. So anyway, here we are. The shooting happens today in a very small town of Newtown, Connecticut. And what struck me as odd, first and foremost, is the fact that, it's a guy with, obviously he's very well trained in what he was doing, because to hit that many people like that, and mind you, even at point blank range, to have that many fatalities is it's pretty damn good with a 9mm. So that much has to be pointed out. But Tim, you hit a home run with that, with psychotropic drugs. And if you take a look, psychotropic drugs have been at the center of most, if not all, of these mass shootings. As a matter of fact, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights International wrote about this in the Huffington Post. It says, another school shooting, another psychiatric drug. Federal investigation long overdue. And it gives some facts. It says, fact, despite 22 international drug regulatory warnings on psychiatric drugs, citing effects of mania, hostility, violence, and even homicidal ideation, and dozens of high-profile shootings and killings tied to psychiatric drug use, there is yet to be a federal investigation on the link between psychiatric drugs and acts of senseless violence. Or, fact, at least 14 recent school shootings were committed by those taking or withdrawing from psychiatric drugs, resulting in 109 wounded and 58 killed. In other school shootings, information about their drug use was never made public, neither confirming or refuting if they were under the influence of prescribed drugs. And finally, fact, between 2004 and 2011, there have been over 11,000 reports to the U.S.'s FDA MedWatch system of psychiatric drug side effects related to violence. These include 300 cases of homicide, nearly 3,000 cases of mania, and over 7,000 cases of aggression. Note, by the FDA's own admission, only 1 to 10% of side effects are ever reported to the FDA. So the actual number of the side effects occurring are most certainly higher. Boys, what do you think?
Well, first off, it's incredible because where's the media on this? Once again, they are failing miserably to report the real story, and that's the thing that you just talked about, Joe. And again, this has been out there, folks, for years, again, since the 90s. So what's the media doing today? The first thing they do after every shooting, they're asking for gun control rather than doing their job and investigating Big Pharma and the role and the relationship of these drugs with a lot of these mass killings.
No, absolutely right. Brooksy, what do you think? Chime in on this.
Well, guys, I'm just looking at headlines right now on Fox, CNN, and MSNBC, and they're all just appealing, exactly like you said. They're not talking anything about the involvement of pharmaceuticals or these antidepressant drugs, which are involved in, almost every mass shooting that the media gives us, from Columbine to Aurora, Virginia Tech, all these things. And all they're doing is appealing, once again, to the irrational mind, trying to take advantage of us with fear, sorrow. I see a tearful Obama, massacre, urgent, evil, visiting community, 26 massacred. I mean, it's just all like, be scared, be horrified, and then boom, as we speak, you got Bloomberg coming out saying we need gun banning now. And you've got the mayor of Boston coming out saying we need national, legislation right now to stop this. So it's sad to see the American people. They're pretty much like sheep, just being herded around, and they're going to go with it. So,
Ken,
they put a lot of warning signs out. All weapons are prohibited on these premises. Mm-hmm. Do you think it'd be more effective if they had a sign posted on the front of the building that says staff heavily armed and trained, any attempt to harm children will be met with deadly force?
Yeah, I mean, now that's a solution. And I guarantee you that they'd be hard-pressed to find somebody crazy enough to go in there and do, unless he's got a death wish, and then what's he going to do, go in there and get shot? That's really all that's going to happen.
Let me talk to the common sense side of the American people.
Sure.
Trust teachers with your children every day. Why don't you trust these teachers to be armed? It would stop this.
Yeah, it certainly would.
Virginia Tech, all could have been stopped. Even the shooting at the movie theater in Colorado all could have been stopped if people were armed.
That's right.
And that's the problem today. The news media and Bloomberg and that idiot mayor now, from which just moved up into the area of idiocracy, from Boston, all screaming for gun control. My thing is, let everybody carry concealed and see what happens. You know, the NRA would probably be more than willing to train teachers on how to use a gun, and the local SWAT teams would probably be more than willing to teach the teachers that are concealed carrying tactics.
Yeah, absolutely. Hell, I would do it in my own community.
Yes, now go ahead and attack the school. There was an FBI agent on Fox News today, because I happen to be catching some of Fox, and he made a very good statement. He says, when you call 911, you need help right now. He says the police normally show up a minute or two too late. It's already over.
Yep. 9 times out of 10.
And that's what happened today. They called 911. By the time the police showed up, it was over.
It was too late. Of the 14 shooters documented to be under the influence of psychiatric drugs, 7 were seeing either a psychiatrist or a psychologist. School shooters aren't the only cases commonly found to be under the influence of psychiatric drugs. Some of the 10 more recent murders and murder-suicides committed by individuals taking or withdrawing from psychiatric drugs resulted into an additional 43 dead and 37 wounded. The correlation between psychiatric drugs and acts of violence and homicide is well documented, both by international drug regulatory warnings and studies, as well as by hundreds of cases where high-profile acts of violence and mass murder were committed by individuals under the influence of psychiatric drugs. The New York State Senate recognized this as far back as 2000, introducing a bill which would, quote, require police to report to the Division of Criminal Justice Services certain crimes and suicides committed by persons using psychotropic drugs, citing a large body of scientific research establishing a connection between violence and suicide and the use of psychotropic drugs. Unfortunately, these bills stalled out in the Finance Committee, but reviewing the international drug regulatory warnings, studies, and adverse reactions reports submitted to the U.S. FDA below, it is evident that the reintroduction of the New York bill is needed on a federal level in order to determine just how many crimes and acts of violence are being committed by individuals under the influence of drugs, documented to induce violence, mania, psychosis, aggression, hostility, and homicide. And that's what these drugs do. You know, nearly every mass school shooting has involved a minor under the influence of psychiatric drugs. Now, the one today, this instance was a 20-year-old student, or 20-year-old son of a teacher who was on these drugs, had split personality disorder, and was somewhat autistic by reports. But what we don't know, guys, and this is the real crux of it all, is yes, we know the side effects, but you don't know the long-term damage that you're doing to your son or your daughter by putting them on these drugs. And it's only through selfishness and self-centeredness, both at the parental level and also at the school level, because remember now the schools are pushing these like crazy on children. And we don't know what the long-term effects are of these drugs on their brains. So this is not, I mean, when the media is focused so much on making this an anti-gun issue, it really makes me sick, because they really are not doing justice to this story by pushing political talking points instead of actually getting to the crux of the problem.
Well, that's what they want to do. They want to disarm the people. You know, they have these guys go with, if it bleeds, it leads. I'll tell you, earlier tonight I was reading an article where they were posting, you know, on a timeline. And I was reading on there where they were talking about this shooter and how he had a mental disorder, and according to his 24-year-old brother, who they falsely accused to begin with. And all of a sudden, when it updated, that whole section was gone.
Unbelievable.
Somebody had them take out the section about the fact that this guy had mental problems. Now, why would you do that? If I'm a reporter and I report that this guy has got mental problems, I would turn around and I would also take, excuse me, I'll get this. Go ahead, guys. Oh, never mind. My wife got it. Thought I was playing music, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought so.
I would not take out the fact that the guy is mentally deranged, that he has a mental condition. They took it out. I mean, I'm right there reading it, and all of a sudden the page updates, and boom, it's gone.
Wow.
So that tells you what the mainstream media is doing. Somebody called them up or told them, take that down. We don't want people to know that he was crazy. Because they're going to push the gun agenda. They're going to push the anti-gun agenda in this country.
You know, and to that point, Ken, here's the other thing we were talking about is, all right, if they want to go down that route, where are they on Fast and Furious and the government, pushing illegal drugs or guns into Mexico? That whole issue. It's like, if you want to go that route, let's go back to the government then.
Yeah, fantastic point. I mean, here's the government going and just dumping 10,000 assault rifles on over the border into Mexico, only for them to be used on our own Border Patrol agents. And how many innocent civilians have died because of this? And there's blood on their hands. Why are they not being brought to justice?
And the other thing, that Connecticut already has strict gun laws in place.
Right.
So really, folks, do you think gun control is the issue? Connecticut is a state that has very strict gun control laws, and yet this still happened. So to banish guns or, to take them away from us is not the answer. That's clearly not the answer. We talked about that police officer that had somebody shooting on him with an assault rifle, and who saved him? A registered gun owner who came out of his house and capped the guy from over 150, 60 yards.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And look at history, folks. If all you need to do, and remember, too, when something like this happens, your first impulse is to think with emotion, and logic kind of goes off to the wayside. So you have to continue to think logically, even through such a horrible tragedy like this. But understand this, that we have history as a reference when it comes to prohibition. And we know that each time things are made illegal because they're bad for you or they're bad for society, it ends up backfiring in the long run. And we can look at alcohol, and we can see what happened when alcohol was made illegal. Did it go away? No. But it created a black market for it, and it also made it very dangerous because you had people making booze that didn't know how to make booze and were actually making poison.
Joe, this article that you've been talking about the psychotropic drugs, there's an interesting point. When every time something like this happens, they always point back to Columbine. Mm-hmm. Well, on April 20th, 1999, 18-year-old Eric Harris and his accomplice Dylan Klebold killed 12 students and a teacher and wounded 26 others before killing themselves. Harris was on the antidepressant Luvox. Klebold's medical records remained sealed. Both shooters had been in anger management classes and undergone counseling. Harris had been seeing a psychiatrist before the shooting.
Yep.
There's something with the drugs that they are feeding our children. It's not the guns, people, because a normal thinking person is not going to do this.
Big Pharma has invested heavily to cover the story up too, Ken. I mean, if folks ask yourself why you're not hearing this stuff, I mean, I'm sure some of you probably have. But again, Big Pharma has spent a lot of money to keep this hidden because they don't want people to know. And the psychotropic drugs, we should go through a list of all of them. I mean, it's voluminous. I mean, everything from Prozac to Zoloft, Boost Bar. I mean, all of these. There are so many now that are all psychotropic, and they tell you right away that you're not supposed to go off them cold turkey. The minute you go off them cold turkey, your brain flips, and that's something the media needs to address, not gun control.
That's right. No, and that's a great point. Some of these people were in withdrawal when this happened. I mean, you don't understand for folks out there that have ever been on any sort of medication that causes a withdrawal, it's horrible. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible feeling. So, and that's just the physical portion of it. I mean, mentally, it can really mess you up. And again, we still don't understand the long-term effects of what this does to people and their brain and what it does as far as a dependency, creating a dependency. I mean, there's so many different facets to look into when it comes to this. But the solution, folks, isn't to ban weapons. Because, you know, banning spoons isn't going to stop you from getting fat.
It's a good point, Joe. Because look what happened in China today. You got 22 kids killed by a knife. So are they going to ban all knives now?
This is an agenda, folks, that's being pushed by the mainstream media and pushed with the express purpose of disarming the American people. And, you know, Rudy Z, who's the host of Wake Up Call here on Orion Talk Radio, said it best. Now, Rudy lives in the UK. And Rudy said, whatever you do, no matter what you do, do not give your guns up. He said specifically, we made that mistake and we are paying a very dear price for it. Don't give your guns up. And he's absolutely right. We cannot give up our guns, and we will not give up our guns. It's as simple as that. And it's going to, I'll tell you what, folks, they know something's coming down the pipe, and they want us disarmed for one reason or another, whether it be an economic collapse or whether it be strict austerity measures that cuts back welfare and you get riots. I don't know what the reason is, but I do know they want us disarmed. And this should be very troubling to everybody out there that has half a brain in their head.
Yeah, it does seem to be a very concerted effort, doesn't it, Joe?
Absolutely. Very, very orchestrated, too. You know, when something like this happens, it's like they've got their talking points already tucked away in the filing cabinet.
Absolutely.
Well, Adolf Hitler said it best: to conquer a nation, first disarm its citizens.
No, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. So we're kind of butting up against a break here. And I want to bring this up, too, because coming up when we come back from break, I'm going to talk about some of these mayors chiming in and what they're saying about this incident. I'll also tell you about that knife-wielding man who injured 22...
Free speech guaranteed. You're listening to the Orion Talk Radio Network.
At OrionTalkRadio.com, you could say that we're all talk.
See, the people of Japan are protesting by the million. They don't want these reactors restarted. They've seen what it's done. There's no safety in these things. There's only death in these things by the millions. You know what their government and TEPCO's telling them to do? F off. You guys are noisy. That's fine. Go ahead and assemble. Go ahead and protest. We're the criminal organization that runs this country. We're not going to listen to you. And they're not. Even though 90% of people don't want these things restarted. The banks do, though. Because see, TEPCO can't make their payments to the bondholders, to the banksters. And that's the worst crime in the world you can do. Is don't pay the banksters. Look at Europe. They'll burn the place down.
Welcome back, folks. Don't forget to check out the Orion Talk Radio archives for all of the past shows that you might have missed from your favorite hosts. Go to the menu bar and click on the archives link, then scroll down the list and find the show you're looking for, listed by date and time. You can listen on the fly just by clicking on the link. Another service to you from Orion Talk Radio. Joe Joseph, Tim Watts, Ryan Brooks, and Ken Hildebrand here. And guys, for this second half, I'd like to start the second half of this broadcast out, Timmy, with that clip from the governor. Now, this is a very interesting clip. Now, this is the governor of Connecticut, and he's giving a news conference on site about what's going on. And they were warned that this was going to happen in advance. Timmy, play that clip for me.
Yeah, this is very disturbing.
Earlier today, a tragedy of unspeakable terms played itself out in this community. Lieutenant Governor and I have been spoken to and in an attempt that we might be prepared for something like this playing itself out in our state.
That's amazing. Really? That's amazing. One more time. Hang on.
Lieutenant Governor and I have been spoken to in an attempt that we might be prepared for something like this playing itself out in our state.
That's incredible. They've been spoken to. All right, who spoke to them?
Yeah, we'd like to know. Who spoke to you, Governor? Because if you did have forewarning or something like that, then shouldn't you have acted upon it? And or I don't know, Tim. It just that was a very, very peculiar or an odd thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but certainly not unexpected. But my problem is, and let me say this first and foremost. I don't believe this is MK Ultra and all that stuff. I believe that this is pharmaceuticals just run amok in our society, and this is one of the side effects of having a drugged up society. Yep. This is what's going to happen, and we're living it now. So, do I think it's MK Ultra or some sort of conspiracy? No. I think that they know what happens when you shove these psychotropic drugs down people's throats, and they know by doing this that, yes, the Second Amendment can eventually, they can definitely put up a good fight against the Second Amendment because you have all these crazies wielding guns. You know what I mean, guys? I mean, this is, I could see how one plays off one another, but I don't think it's like a government psyop to say. What I'm saying is this is the problem of a self-centered society coupled with a very greedy pharmaceutical industry. Together, you know, they have a license to kill, and they shove these drugs down people's throat. This is a side effect of it happening, and then they go and they blame the guns. How convenient, while sweeping the problems with these drugs under the carpet.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead, Ken.
Would you like to hear from somebody who most gun people don't like and what he had to say about Columbine?
Sure.
Here's a little clip from Michael Moore. Listen to this.
In Bowling for Columbine, we never really came up with the answer in terms of why this happened. I think we did a good job of exposing all the reasons that were given were a bunch of BS. You know, Marilyn Manson caused them to do it. This or that caused them to do it. And none of it really made any sense. That's why I believe there should be an investigation in terms of what pharmaceuticals, prescribed pharmaceuticals, these kids were on. And perhaps parents, it would have a shocking, it would be shocking, I think, to the millions of parents who prescribe this for their kids if it was finally explained to them, if this is the case, that this perhaps occurred for no other reason other than because of these prescriptions. Imagine what that would do. Imagine how people would totally rethink things, grasping for every little straw they can to explain why something like Columbine happens, when in fact it may be nothing more than this. How else do you explain two otherwise decent kids, very smart, no history of violence to other kids in the school? Why them? Why did this happen? It's an extremely legitimate question to pose, and it demands an investigation.
What do you think?
Yeah, he hits the nail on the head.
That's, back from Bowling for Columbine. And again, you know, this story has been out there. You know, that's the whole thing. It's if Michael Moore can pick it up, why can't the mainstream media pick this up?
Well, that's a good question.
I cut this off about a half a minute short of finishing because he does talk about the drugs, these pharmaceutical companies that did tests on the drugs that Klebold and Harris were taking, and they said they were like 12 or 15 times more likely to do something than if they were on one of the other drugs. That's just the drugs that they were taking, 15 times more likely to commit some violent act or commit suicide.
Isn't that interesting?
So these pharmaceuticals, they know what's going on. They just don't get the blame for it.
And with all of this evidence, you know, they still, I'm going to give you a couple examples of instead of using their minds and understanding and seeing the evidence, you have people like Boston Mayor Menino saying it's time for national policy on guns. At the same time that New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg issued a statement going full bore after gun owners on the heels of the tragic shooting in Connecticut, Mayor Thomas Menino of Boston issued a similar statement. It was just as strident and just as political. He said, quote, "As a parent and grandparent, I am overcome with both grief and outrage by the tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut. This unspeakable act of violence will forever imprint this day in our hearts and minds. My heart goes out to the families impacted by this senseless tragedy and the many others we have witnessed across the United States. As a mayor who has witnessed too many lives forever altered by gun violence, it is my responsibility to fight for action. Today's tragedy reminds us that now is the time for action. Innocent children will now never attend a prom, never play in a big game, never step foot on a college campus. Now is the time for a national policy on guns that takes the loopholes out of the laws, the automatic weapons out of the neighborhoods, and the tragedies like this today out of our future." What do you think, boys? Good strategy?
You know, there's something else that I wanted to throw out back to an earlier statement you mentioned, Joe, about you didn't think that, you know, probably MK Ultra was involved. You thought, you know, just totally could be just psychotropic drugs. I want to throw out the option that maybe, you know, like when things happen on 9/11, it's a combination of things. And so you know how they've got these HIPAA laws now where they say, oh, you can't get your medical records, but it makes it easy for the government to get your records. I mean, they know everybody's, you know, what drugs they're on. And where I'm going with this is what's interesting is in 1999, the same time as Columbine came out, there was a revelation that our intelligence agencies owned something called SQUAD, SSSS, and that stands for Silent Sound Spread Spectrum. And we've talked about this, Joe, before.
Yeah.
It's the fantastic claim that our intelligence agencies are able to implant thoughts into your head with this SQUAD system. And it does exist, and it was revealed again at the same time, same year as Columbine. I'm just saying, you know, if somebody knows that a certain person is unstable and they're on these drugs, that might be a very good target, you know, to go out and actually experiment with something like this. I'm sorry I have to throw that out there, but again, you know, this technology does exist, and somebody does seem to have an agenda with gun control in this country. It's just amazing how many of these shootings, guys, that we've had in the last decade. I mean, it's just it's unbelievable.
That's right. No, it is unbelievable. And you know, it's responsible to mention things like that, Tim, because you have to leave no stone unturned when you start talking about truly investigating these issues and getting to the heart of the problem. And, you know, the only way you can really get to the heart of the problem is by entertaining the fact that, yeah, you're right, that could be it's a very logical alternative.
Well, here's the thought. Why did every one of these people decide, I'm going to get a gun and I'm going to a school? Why did all of these people decide, I'm getting a gun and I'm going to a school, rather than flip out and do something else? Maybe go out and throw rocks at cars from a freeway overpass. I mean, why do they all entail guns in schools?
I'm sure that they can come up with some psychiatric babble that will sate the sheeple, you know, as far as an explanation of that, Tim. But when it all comes down to it, it's too coincidental. And the copyright or the copycat thing, I don't buy it either. You know, I just don't buy it. Like, oh yeah, that guy did that. Well, let me outdo him.
Yeah.
You know, what's next? We gonna have a mass shooting of altar boys? You know, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Ryan, you've been eerily quiet.
Well, yeah, Joe, I'm just looking over these words from Bloomberg, and he's supposed to be a Republican, isn't he?
No, well, he's a Bloombergican.
Republican and Democrat, and then I think he went independent this last time, so he's been all over the field.
Yeah, he's a Bloombergican.
Oh, yeah. I mean, his propaganda, I mean, he is just spewing it. You know, guys, for every day we wait, 34 more people are murdered with guns. So, I mean, just stuff like that. It's just playing, once again, on the irrational mind. I mean, all of these things that you guys are talking about, like the involvement of pharmaceutical drugs, the media's not covering it all, and all they're doing is appealing to our emotions. And it's just a shame, no matter who's responsible or how it went down, it's a shame that we just get right behind these puppets as they come out and tell us we need to do this. Have you seen Rupert Murdoch challenging politicians to find the courage to ban automatic weapons? I mean, this is just... it's very
Because
silly.
you want to know something? When the system comes crashing down, they are the ones that the peasants with the pitchforks and the torches are going to be going after. So, of course, they want them to ban these weapons.
Yeah.
Of course, that's what they want. And they will use any event that they possibly can to push their agenda. Because it's not about reporting. It's not about the press. It's not about getting to the truth. It's about the bottom dollar. And it's about fleecing as many of those bottom dollars as they can out of you before the system comes crashing down. And their ultimate goal, before it does, is to make sure that you cannot put up a defense or mount an offense should you have to.
That's a good point, Joey. And, you know, history takes us back to what they're afraid of, the French Revolution. You know, when they came and they dragged the opulent and the kings and whatever, you know, and they beheaded them with guillotines.
Yeah, and, you know, I can't play that on air, honey. I don't have the capability, but I will say this. Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste. You know? Yep. Here we go again with this, you know, and they'll use it. Never let a crisis go to waste. You can get things through that you normally couldn't. And that was Rahm Emanuel, folks. I mean, this is right from the horse's mouth. And I know I'm preaching to the choir to a lot of listeners out there, but really you have to understand the truth behind all of this. And the truth is they want to disarm you. And there are many countries out there right now wishing they never gave their guns up.
Yep. How about some of the things from this incident here that are pretty weird? You know, they're talking about the fact that this kid's parents were both killed already. Is that have they corroborated that now, and both are in separate locations? The mom was supposedly a teacher at the school or something like that?
Yeah, but she got shot at home beforehand.
Exactly. And so the news tonight is trying to say that he went to the school to kill his mom. Seriously? His mom's already dead. Really?
His mom was already dead. Yes. Well, you know, can we chalk that up to maybe some irresponsible reporting? Maybe some...
Yeah. But think about that. Okay, so you go kill your mom at one location. You go kill your dad at another location. Nobody notices any of this stuff, and then he makes it to the school?
I know. And that's the thing, too, you know. You have to remember, that again, this is a state with very strict gun laws. So typically if you hear a pap, pap, especially in a higher income community, it would set off alarm bells. So you're right, Tim. You know, you go, you pop your mother, you go, you pop your father. You'd think by at least that time somebody's on to you.
Yeah, neighbors would have reported it. Oh, my gosh, I heard gunshots next door. And, you know, again, you know, where are the police?
Well, that's the thing, too. When this stuff goes down, folks, you don't realize how fast it is before it's over. I mean, it seems like an eternity when you're in it. Mm-hmm. And Ryan and Ken, you know, you guys can speak to this too. You know, in the thick of things, it seems like an eternity to you, but really in all actuality, it's over in a flash, you know, and you're just kind of like, wow. And by the time the police get there, I mean, the smoke is gone. I mean, it's just all you have is carnage, and there's no way. And that's not the police's fault for that. I mean, to be honest with you, they just cannot respond quick enough. So you have to, you know, Ryan, I mean, do you agree with Ken about perhaps, you know, teachers concealed carrying?
I was actually going to say that, and I mean, I mentioned it on my show. I agree with Ken 100%. I mean, we trust these teachers to teach our children but we can't trust them to have the capabilities to defend themselves and their students if some type of scary, crazy wacko starts shooting everybody. I mean, they've instilled our culture or our society with this mentality like, you know, the police are going to save you. You know, so if someone's breaking into your house, call the police and then hide and wait for them to get there. If someone's shooting up the school, hide under your desk and wait for the police to get there. That is a bigger part of the problem than guns. You know, it's like anything but guns. But as we're seeing, guns.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Timmy, go ahead.
Well, you know, to Ryan's point, you know, at the bare minimum, what will come out of this is they'll station a police officer in every school. And some people might say, oh, that's awful, that's awful. And, you know, yeah, and what it's going to do is condition kids to get used to the police state. But I'll tell you right here where I live in Minneapolis, they've already stationed police officers in the schools. It's been going on for a long time. They're there 24/7. Well, maybe not 24/7, but for the entire school day. It's like they have their own little police station inside the school. Now, granted, the schools that we have here are, you know, 3,000 and 4,000 kids in the school. It's like a small city, but still I see that coming for all schools across America.
And what happens if the guy kills the cop first?
Yeah.
They're right back to square one.
You're right back to square one. But you want to know something? It all boils down to this. You can't fix the problem unless you truly know what the symptoms are, unless you truly know what the problems are. You have to get to the root of the problem to be able to solve it. And if you keep getting fed misinformation by saying the guns are the problem, well then, folks, I mean, when you're loaded up into these trucks and sent off to FEMA camps and everything else, I got news for you. You're going to wish you fought. You're going to wish you stood up for your rights. And you're going to wish that you made the sacrifice when it could have counted. So now's the time to fight. Don't you think, Ken?
I'll put it to the people out there this way. On June 11th in 1964, Cologne School massacre, armed with an insecticide sprayer converted into a flamethrower, a lance, and a home-built mace, 42-year-old Walter Seifert entered the Catholic, whatever the name of the school is here, and opened fire on the girls playing in the courtyard. He then knocked in the classroom windows with his mace and fired inside. 8 children and 2 teachers died. 20 children and 2 teachers survived with severe burns. After taking a cyanide pill, Seifert died the following day in custody. So it doesn't have to be a gun.
No, it doesn't.
It can be anything. And
it could be Tim Watts' microphone.
That might help. But no, the way things are today, they want to make us totally dependent on the police state.
Yes, and on government too. Right, absolutely. It's just a total dependency, Ken.
And they cannot respond. My question to the people out there is this. If confronted by a criminal, would you rather have your cell phone or would you rather have a handgun? It's that simple.
Wow.
It's that simple. Do you want to stand there and dial 911 while the guy's blowing your brains out, or would you rather pump 2 in his chest? Guns are the answer to the problem here. If these teachers had been armed, the possibility of these kindergartners of their survival went way up if they'd have had a couple of teachers concealed carrying. In all of these cases of school violence, if the teachers were armed, if other people were armed, there are a lot of cases out there where somebody had been caught and stopped by somebody who was armed just after.
What about movie theaters, Ken? Movie theaters. Look at that movie theater shooting in Colorado.
In Colorado, they had several servicemen in there for the movie, and they were unarmed because that's a gun-free zone. So basically, if you look at it, all of these things are soft targets. There is no way for them to defend themselves, and they're just nothing but targets. And I'll put it to the people this way. How you feel about the nation of Israel one way or the other, they learned a long time ago that because all of the targets that were getting hit on their side were all soft targets. they armed their population, and it stopped.
Yeah, no, good point. Good point. Now, folks, coming up on Sunday on the Conspiracy Chronicles, Tim and I welcome Lisa Goodman to the broadcast to discuss the Alabama Project, and that was Nixon's assassination team. It's very interesting. We're going to get into how there was an assassination plot on Governor Wallace, and how the Watergate scandal was an actual cover-up for another crime. I mean, so it's going to be a very good 2 hours of radio. Make sure you tune in on Sunday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. But, guys, it was awesome having you here tonight. Fantastic 1 hour, kind of hit it hard. And I'll be listening in on you fellas on your next broadcast, so better make it good. Folks, we'll see you Sunday evening. Have a good night.
Night, guys.
DependableVoice.com, the total solution, one-stop shop for your business telecommunications needs. Nationwide business class telecommunications services, providing voice and data, voice over internet, and hosted PBX. Dependable Voice is now offering the first month free for any voice over internet and hosted PBX services. Save up to 50% on your current phone bill and save thousands of dollars with no need to purchase PBX hardware. Hosted PBX and voice over internet services include free local and long-distance calling to the U.S., Canada, and Caribbean. Email to voicemail, follow-me services, multiple visual call reports, dynamic auto attendant, advanced ACD and call queue, unified voice and fax messaging, and much, much more. Plus, get your first month free with a minimum 3-phone system. Call Dependable Voice today at 1-888-346-1085